okay. Go live. Let's see what happens. Okay, it says that I'm live. All right, it says that I'm live, and hopefully I am. I haven't been live in a while, and okay, so according to YouTube, it looks like I've got 2 concurrent viewers, so people are showing up. So that's nice. I appreciate that, you guys, because it has been a bit of a while since I've been live here on YouTube. So I'm actually just moving some screens around so that I can see any chat that comes up. So yeah, I wasn't sure if maybe YouTube had changed some things in the last month or so, such that maybe this would not work for some goofy reason. So let me look at what's going on YouTube, because my concurrent viewers just went from 2 to 0 for some goofy reason. Oh, it looks like it's working. So sorry that the webcam didn't seem to decide to work today. I plugged the sucker in and it did nothing. It just didn't work. So what do you do? I know it's not as fun to watch a live stream without my beautiful face showing and talking to you guys, and so I apologize for that. Like I said, I plugged in the webcam. Again, haven't live streamed in a couple months. There's a host of reasons for that really don't have much at all to do with the cartoon and its development. So there's a few things I'm going to be doing today while I'm here. So if you're... Actually, I tell you what, it doesn't look like really anybody's watching in the moment. So I think what I'm going to do is just actually get to work on this little fix-up. And then if people show up, I will go ahead and begin to maybe get into some other specific things that I was thinking about getting into today. So what I am doing, though, is among other things, I'm working on the music and score for the first section of the show. So that's something, as I say, if people show up today and they're interested, then I will kind of give you guys a little glimpse of what I'm working on here as we get into the beginning of the show. I've got not sure what my time is here, but there's probably a minute of show here that I've done scoring and sound effects and things like that. And so Nitesh Yadav, hello, how are you? I don't remember you from, the old days, the old days being a whole couple months ago. But yeah, thanks for checking in, and welcome to the live stream. So I guess what I'm kind of doing is giving people an idea of what I'm planning to do, because this is still the Truman Show of animation, meaning you just get to see me do what I do, and whatever that happens to be today. So actually, I should come back here to my editor and say that there's really 2 things. One is kind of as I say, for the people who come around or have come around pretty frequently, I was going to kind of show them what I've been working on as far as the score and sound effects type stuff. But also at the same time, I'm kind of just going through the show a bit and finding things that I want to fix. And as time goes by, I expect there's going to be a lot of them. Like right here, as I was zipping through here on this shot, I thought, hey Maria, hi, I got your second email, by the way. Thank you for the Christmas card, or I guess that's what you'd call it. It's sort of a Christmas card. But yeah, no problem. As I say, I haven't been around for a while, and as you know, Maria, from my brief appearance on Darren's live stream, one of the things that happened over the last couple months was kind of ushering my adoptive mother to her eternal reward. So she passed away, it's been about a month ago now, and so that, that's one of those things in life that comes along, and you just kind of have to deal with. And so but yeah, there've been other distractions, frankly, over the last couple months. So it was kind of an appropriate moment for me to just take a break. So it is not as if I've been making tons of progress, but I am getting back in the saddle again, and feeling pretty good about it, pretty enthused about moving forward with this thing. For those who may not know, thanks Maria, for those who may not know, the status of the show is simply that we have quite literally 2 complete 24-minute episodes that have been animated. But again, as I go through it, this isn't going to get released until I'm satisfied that it's ready to be released. And so part of that process and that decision-making process is looking at what I got and going, could I do better, right? So there's no hurry. So anyway, this shot here, the way that Vespigi turns, I thought, you know what, let's go over to Krita 5, and which that's what this is. It's a good time for open source software in a sense. Blender 3 is out, although to be fair, I loaded it on my system and it immediately blew a DLL not found error, which for me is a real, I have a hard time with that. If you're going to build software, especially if you're going to call it portable, then it's up to you as the developers to make sure that all the necessary dependencies are there. Well, in the case of Blender 3, with every build that I've loaded up, it just doesn't. It won't run. It warns me about a missing DLL. So that's not an unusual thing. As a software developer myself, I certainly understand how that can happen, but the likelihood is that Windows 10 and up probably has this DLL typically already in place. And so if you do the full installer program with Blender 3, I suspect it probably gets installed. But I loaded from the zip file the portable version, and my expectation with any portable version of software is that any dependencies will be baked into the portable. Basically all stuck in the folder, right, so that the program can find them. That excuse me, that didn't happen. I was a little bummed out, but yeah. So Blender 3 is kind of off the list for the moment. But what we're seeing here is Krita 5. And Krita 5, this is beta 2. Now, I think Krita 5 is actually officially out now. But I like it. I think they've done a darn good job, and for all the complaining I've done over the last couple of years about Krita in various ways, I have to say they really have done a nice job and gotten a lot of things right with Krita 5. So what am I going to do today? Well, what I'm going to do is I've got this track here. This is Vespigi, okay? This is the king. And as you can see, it's a pretty quick animation where he just turns his head and then he says a line of dialogue. So what I was thinking is, I don't like the fact that basically his body really isn't quite wide enough in this shot compared to this shot. So it's a really pretty major sin on my part as an animator, in that my character has really changed characterization, which is, pretty much unforgivable. But yeah, I did that. So what I'm going to do to just, I don't know exactly what my strategy here is going to be for fixing it, but this is going to unfold in real time. But that's what the animation Truman show is all about, especially considering that this is Krita 5, so I may bump into some things that I didn't foresee. I had a video, a couple months ago before I sort of went silent for a couple months, where I talked about the new features in Krita 5. And the big one, and by the way, if you hear a loud chirping sound, that's Zuko. It looks like he's considering getting chirpy, so we'll see what he does. But the big thing with Krita 5, and I'll just save my work here so I can demonstrate this, the really big change that's monstrously huge is the ability to add a transform mask to a layer and then animate it. And what that means in practice is that you can take a layer, so this is the character here, you can take a layer, and then if you grab the transform mask and hit the A key to animate, you can rotate, scale, or do whatever you want with that character. And if you go over here in this animation curves interface and hit the plus sign, okay, what I just did was create an animation keyframe. So if I'm just doing this again for demonstration purposes, move this over here, and then if I add another keyframe like this, and then make a change, then it does the interpolation, and you have something that obviously people have wanted in Krita for a long, long time, which is interpolated keyframe animation. One of the cool things about it that I think, as I say, they really got right, and we'll see if this turns out to be wrong, but at least with beta 1, what I noticed was if you take the center of the transform mask and place it in a certain spot, like here you can see that would kind of be sort of where his neck would be. Then, unlike previous versions of Krita, the transform mask does remember, as you can see here, it remembers its center point. And so what that means for Krita users is you finally have the ability to set up a character rig using animation, interpolated transform animation. So in the example here, what you would essentially be able to do is rotate the guy's head in a way that's predictable, right? So in the real world, obviously he wouldn't be attached to a body. The body would be separate. The body and the head would be grouped together, and ostensibly you might actually have a transform mask on the group as well, so that you can move the whole body as a group. So I hope that makes sense. But that's the cool thing. More simplistically, it gives you the ability to just do things like camera zooms and things like that. So if you do like I do, where you might create animation in full HD, but then your final output might be broadcast HD, and that gives you some crop range, so that you can do things like pans and zooms and add camera movement to your shots. Now, to be fair, it still remains true that Krita is it's a vastly superior painting program to Tahoma2D or Opentoonz, and the new features relating to animation I think are most valuable to people who really love Krita and want to use Krita, because truthfully, Tahoma or Opentoonz is still way, 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 way superior to Krita in terms of the animation tools that are available. So pick your poison. As some of you guys know, what I typically do is I use Krita as a paint program, and then I will occasionally just hit Control-C. And the cool thing about Tahoma2D, which is different from Opentoonz, is that you can actually cut and paste from other third-party programs. So you can actually kind of use the two applications in tandem, right? So I'm going to discard that because, well, I'm not going to quit, but I'm not going to be working at Tahoma on this shot. So anyway, that's what I'm working on here. I want to fix Vespegi's the dimensionality of his head. So how am I going to do that? Well, it looks to me like really there's two keyframes here. You can see a glitch right there that should, I'll just go ahead and fix that right now. So I'm going to hit the B key. So yeah, I mean, guys, it's nice to be back. I think I am back now, as opposed to being here and then disappearing again. As I said, there were quite a few things that kind of went on in my life in addition to the passing of my mom that really just led me to a place where it's like, you know what, I'm just going to take a break from all this stuff for a bit. So I have not been super productive. Now, to be fair, one of the reasons for that is because of what you see over here. Hey, Inyo-san, good to see you, man. It's going better. Let's just put it that way without getting into what was less than better. It is going better. So things are good, and as I said, I think I'm back. Probably to stay. What the live stream schedule will be, who knows? But it may just continue to be the Truman Show for a while. So one thing that I have been doing, I guess I'll just kind of play this. I've gone back and forth in multiple times on the idea of crowdfunding the show, okay? And my decision about that at the moment is kind of what it's obviously been by default, which is that I haven't moved forward with a crowdfunding type of thing. And at this point, I'm actually more convinced than ever that the right thing to do is wait on that and focus on my core skills that make me able to do what I do, which is basically 3 things: writing, animating, and scoring, which means sound design too, but basically creating cartoons. Get back in the saddle into the normalcy of a normal schedule of working on this thing. One of the rationales behind the crowdfund, of course, was the idea that I could really only justify giving this thing an hour or 2 a day, and that's really what I've done for, over a year. So one of the rationales behind the crowdfund would be to support actually kind of making this a full-time job. So I may come out and propose that idea, but at this point I don't see a great need to, and I'm more interested in just getting better and better and better at what I'm doing. Well, what have I been doing? Well, let's take a look. Here's the intro to the show, just part of it. So you guys have maybe seen this for a while. Hey, Art. Okay. So let me give you a couple caveats before this enters. So the show's about to start, kind of thing. Okay, a couple caveats. One is I do expect to have some changes in the voices, right? So the characterization of the voices, I'm not doing all the voices, but I am doing quite a few of them. And so in what you have here on this screen, I would say it's pretty good, but there is also room for improvement. So without picking it out clip by clip, as I'm pointing with my mouse here at different audio clips, I expect that there's going to be some voices that are redone. And by the way, most significantly, when I originally conceived of Golek, he was going to be based on Edward G. Robinson. So I kind of had him talking like this. This kind of a voice, that sort of a thing. Kind of a boxy, which is obviously an American sort of old school film, classic American actor kind of thing. And as I've seen the show, sort of come together, and I'm, with the voices and stuff, I'm going, I don't really think that's working. I think, so I'm actually thinking more of a Yul Brynner type of thing. Maybe more of a traditional, no, that doesn't sound quite like Yul Brynner. He's got, I'd have to listen to him. The problem is when I listen to an actor, I usually can copy him, and I don't really have him clearly in my mind. But more of this kind of an accent. More of this kind of a, probably more like traditionally what people would expect from a villain's voice anyway, I would guess. But anyway, so here's what I've been working on, is getting back in the saddle of music. Asher, there's something I've been wondering about.
I knew this day would come. Well, it's perfectly natural to want to know your story.
Story?
To finally learn how you came to live with me.
Actually, I was just wondering if we had any honey cakes. But now that you mention it, I have always kind of wondered.
All right, Melchizedek. It's time you finally learn the truth.
Okay, so I'll jump in and say, you love Yul Brynner's voice. Okay, cool. Thank you, Inio-san. I appreciate that. It's very kind. I want to say one of the things that for me is working in this section is that if you feel like the change in the music there just a moment ago was overblown, that's the whole idea. Because one of the challenges of this scene was I had to figure out how to put in some dramatic music that speaks to the fact that this is a backstory. This is Asher telling Mel the history, right? But yet it jumps back from the backstory, from the flashback. It jumps back to the present multiple times. And so how to handle that musically was kind of a challenge. So what I decided to do is kind of make it tongue-in-cheek. So that's why there's this somewhat abrupt trend from this more comedic type music into this real dramatic music. And you'll see here in a moment how that interacts with the change from flashback to the present. So let me go ahead and start it.
Now that you mention it, I have always kind of wondered.
All right, Melchizedek. It's time you finally learn the truth. For many years, our beautiful land of Newsy enjoyed peace and prosperity. Until the king and queen were stricken by a mysterious illness.
Take this medicine, my lord.
It will help.
Thank you, good Golek. Of course.
But that's terrible.
Indeed, it was a mess. The king did not long survive. Balder, the elder, would assume the throne, with Vespigi, the younger, at his side. But Golek, the high priest, had plans of his own.
Are you talking about Golek? Golek?
Yes, of course. Golek. Pay attention. This is where I come into the story.
Okay, so that's basically where I left off in terms of working on the score. So you see what I'm talking about. You know, you're going from this almost too dramatic music behind the flashback to, you know, these spots where they jump in. For me, I thought it was funny. You know, I thought it was funny to do it that way. So anyway, that's something that I am working on steadily. And my hope was to get the whole flashback, we'll get that scored. And then my thinking was, so this is the whole backstory. And then the gag at the end of the backstory is that Asher hasn't actually told Mel anything about his own history. Because that comes out later in the show. And then Asher's answer to that is, oh, nope, gotta go. The villagers aren't going to feed themselves. And then they're off to do their good work of feeding the poor. So, hey, Smug. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been poking at, and frankly, for the amount of time I've been off of YouTube, not live streaming, you would think I'd have gotten a heck of a lot more done than I have, but as I say, it kind of took me a bit of time to deal with some other things in life and also sort of get back in the creative saddle with music, because I haven't really done any musical scoring for, well, since I did Healed by Grace 2, so that would have been 2018. So it's been like 3 years since I actually did any serious attempt at scoring anything. So anyway, back over to here. So I don't know how useful this will be for you guys today, but let's just kind of do the animation Truman Show thing. So what does that mean? Well, Vespigi's head is too narrow, and probably just as significantly, if you notice right here, it's like this isn't even close to being centered properly on his head. So I don't know what I was thinking that day. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, I decided what I will do is drag this keyframe and this keyframe, into a new layer. Okay, so now we have two Vespigi layers. There's the Vespigi fixes, and then there's Vespigi. If we mute this track, it looks like Krita kind of sort of did the right thing. And when I dragged this keyframe out, it essentially put in a blank keyframe on frame 1 for me. I didn't think it would, frankly. Well, actually, technically, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe the absence of any keyframe at all means that the frame is just blank. So either way, the point is that on this track, Vespigi starts here. So now we've got these two images. And kind of the problem I was potentially describing there with this frame is actually going to happen here. Because what's going to happen is when we get to this frame, we're going to have the two drawings overlapping each other. So what you do is you go to this next frame here and hit insert, so it puts a blank keyframe in there so that this track ends after this frame, right? So now it looks the same as it did before I dragged the keyframes into another track. Okay, so why did I do that? Well, what I'm trying to do is basically just make his head wider. I'll deal with the crown shortly. Let me think about that. Actually, it might be better to just deal with the crown first. So I'm going to do that. Again, this is kind of on the embarrassing side because this is really, really off center in a kind of a stupid way. So I'm hitting the S key, which I don't know if it's a default hotkey in Krita for selection, because I remember I set that up a long time ago, many versions of Krita ago, because I wanted to have the same hotkeys that I had in Opentoonz. Okay, so now I hit the S key. If I was in Opentoonz or Tahoma, after making a selection like that, you'd be able to go ahead and move it or deform it as part of the selection process. In other words, the S key is the only tool. With Krita, you have two tools you're using together. One is for S key for selection, but then it's the A key to do a transformation of whatever's selected. Okay, now this, okay, hold on a second. Okay, we just had a interesting, we got our first glitch for the day. Okay, the glitch is this. Gosh, I really had wished, I had forgotten about this, but this is one of the things I had actually hoped they would fix in Krita 5, and it looks like they haven't. Okay, so what is going on? What's going on is, if you've selected a layer in Krita, but then you select these keyframes on different tracks, when you select those keyframes, you are not selecting the track. You're only selecting the keyframe. The track is still selected here. This is Vespigi that's selected, not the Vespigi fixes. It would make way more sense to me that if I click on this keyframe in this track, that this track click like that would also be selected, and it's not. But that's been true with Krita forever. So if any of you guys have the ear of the Krita developers, I would encourage them to consider fixing that. But anyway, so now that I've grabbed the correct track, now when I grab the selection, it's going to do what I expected it to do. Okay, so basically I'm just going to line that up with his nose, like so. Okay, now that's a little dangerous. We're going to have to do a fair amount of painting to fix that. So I'm looking and thinking. I could put it on a separate track. And we do have the, yes, I'm going to hit Control X, Control V. Okay, so what I just did was I deliberately took that little piece and stuck it on a different track. And the reason I did it that way is because there is this other keyframe that's a transition into this change of pose. So why not have this little piece on a separate track so that I can just move it, just transform it to where it needs to be for the next keyframe. Okay, so having done that, I'm going to get rid of that. And now I'm hitting Control Shift A to unselect everything. And okay, yeah. For a minute there, I was a little mystified about what I was seeing. What I was seeing is the background bleeding through. So, okay. So now what do we do? Well, let's take this keyframe. Let's make sure we have the right layer selected. Okay, now that's bad too. Look at what just happened. Okay, so this layer was selected, the paint layer that just got created with the piece of the, this one that has the piece of the crown. And when I selected this layer, see that? Okay. That seems like a bad choice to me. All right, so what just happened was this layer, because it's muted, because it's turned off, once I clicked on this other layer, it disappeared and all the other layers moved up one notch. That's pretty confusing. You don't like your interface just jumping around on its own like that. Hey, Dead Pianist, haven't seen you in a while there, buddy. So, sorry about that little rogue click. I'm going to go ahead and close Tahoma so I don't accidentally open it up again. Okay, so now what I need to do is take the Vespigi fixes and, well, from a painting standpoint, do the fixes. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm just going to grab this color and do a little painting like so. You know, bearing in mind that the piece that I cut out of this is going to be you know, it's going to be in a separate layer. So, no big deal. So the whole point here is just to clean up this section so that I can then get the other piece of the crown in place over top of it. Okay, so I'm using just my basic pencil, by the way, nothing special on the brush. I'm trying to line up the shadow zone. Of course, it's going to get covered by the layer that's currently hidden anyway. But so this is actually kind of a good example of I'm just making this up as I go along. I did not have a firm plan going into it, so I'm just kind of dealing with what comes up here as it comes up. So one of the things one could perhaps criticize in this shot, and this shot was originally done a long time ago. You've been learning Houdini. Nice. Houdini has been a really just a mega powerful program for a lot of years, and frankly I would have to say that everything they're doing in Blender now with, you know, geometry nodes and stuff like that is certainly more influenced by Houdini than, you know, any of its other competitors like, you know, Maya or, you know, 3ds Max, that type of stuff. Well, it's a great idea. I mean, it's the whole idea of making a workflow that's extremely procedural. So, okay, so I'm gonna reset. I don't remember. It's been a long time. What is it? Alt 5? Control 5? I can't remember. Maybe it's just 5. Yep, it's just 5. Okay, I should know that. But yeah, in Krita, when you want to reset the rotation of the screen, it's the number 5. Okay, so now we've got this piece that we can hit the A key and maybe fine tune it a little bit like that. Okay, that's not too horrible. And I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to hit the A key again, but this time I'm going to do liquefy. So I can just essentially massage this a little bit to make it line up better with what's behind it. Okay. Think that'll be okay. And then let's hit the B key and just do a little bit of painting fixing. So this is pretty boring work. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you kind of probably wish you didn't have to do. If you really planned ahead, you probably wouldn't have to do it. But yeah, it's just, I've never seen it fail though. When you're dealing with a really large project, you know, you're gonna come up with stuff that you did, you know, a year ago or something, you know, months earlier, that you realize you didn't quite do it as smart as maybe you would have if you were doing it most recently. In the case of this project, the most obvious manifestation of that dynamic would be the fact that there's almost no scenes that I've done in Krita for months. You know, the first thing, I think the first to introduce that type of node setup was Soft Image with ice. I don't know about that. I actually think even back in the like 1994 or something, I mean like really early in the days when they were making Beast Wars, because they used Soft Image for that. I think in the earliest days of CGI, Houdini was around, because I remember it being a, you know, a $10,000 program or whatever. It was obscenely expensive, which they all were back then in the 90s. But, you know, Houdini was around, and I think that it's kind of amazing that they've always sort of been the also ran in the, you know, like through, let's say from 1995 to 2005, certainly, you know, you got this massive competition going on between 3ds Max and Maya. And the studios like Pixar, of course, always had their own tools that they made. themselves. But Houdini just did what it did. They just stuck to their idea for all those years, and it turned out that their paradigm was really the right one. Okay, so obviously this has got to be fixed, but what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the flow. So I'm trying to do things in the right order, in the sense that if we get the animation right and the positioning of the crown right, then we'll bake them together, and then we can widen the character, because right now the character is a little too skinny. Essentially, he looks correct here and he looks too skinny here, especially in this shot. It's not a huge difference, but it's just something I noticed, so I'm like, okay, let's fix it. Okay. There is no super chat option. To tell you the truth, bruh, I don't even know. I mean, super chat, what is that? Like, you pay $5 to get the ear of the person who's live streaming? It doesn't really make sense when you've only got 6 people watching, though. So, I mean, you know what I mean? Anything you say, I'm going to hear. So, but that's basically a monetization thing, isn't it? Super chat, that's the idea there. Let people make money by letting people move to the front of the line in terms of their comments. Am I understanding that correctly? Let me know in the chat if you wouldn't mind. Okay, so again, let's just do this the hard way. Since here, now that I'm back on YouTube, I will say this, guys. One of the things I'm really committed to going forward is really taking my time, really focusing here on, and that's why I'm doing these fixes, is just, I really want to just focus on doing quality work, In the past, since some of you guys have been listening to me live stream, I've really put too much emphasis on working fast. And there's nothing wrong with working fast. I like to race, okay? Like, if I have a plan, which I don't today. Today I'm very much winging it and just sort of dealing with the challenges that appear when they show up. But if you have a plan, it is fun to race, so there's nothing wrong with working fast. But I've certainly emphasized, put it this way, we'll take it to extremes. Let's say I do this thing and it sucks. Okay? Let's say it really sucks. And you look at it and you say, well, Dave, it's not horrible, but, well, actually, you know what? It sucks. Let's just say it sucked. Okay? Under what circumstances would the answer that I give be, well, yeah, but I did it so fast? When would that ever make sense? That would not make any sense. Oh, sorry, Maria. Yeah, Houdini. It's like the schematic in Opentoonz, the schematic in Tahoma. Okay, now imagine a 3D animation program where everything about the program is driven by nodes, like the schematic. Okay? So for example, if you just create a new object that's going to be a model of, a creature or something, right? So it's going to be a CG 3D model that's going to have vertexes that are connected together to form planes or faces. Okay? Now imagine every time you invoke your tools to change the position of some vertices or add some or extrude or anything, every time you do something, let's say, it creates another node, and what happens is the things you did earlier feed into the nodes later, and so the whole thing's procedural, which means at any time in any place in that flow you could go in and change something and it's going to affect everything downstream. Okay, that's arguably the most powerful paradigm for well, a lot of different types of software, frankly. And that's what you're seeing in Blender now with geometry nodes. Of course, it's always been that way in the compositor. It's a node-based compositor. Point of the story being, Houdini has always been like that for 20 years. Houdini is a CGI program where everything has been fully node-based, fully procedural, and many would argue fully powerful. Probably not really disputably, Houdini has been the most powerful, flexible 3D animation program around. So, yeah, it's definitely a good one to learn. You know, if you're especially now, even more than some years ago. If you're wanting to learn a CGI program, Houdini is not a bad choice, friends. Of course, I'm partial to our open source software, so I'm more of a Blender guy, but so my late version of Blender now is, of course, 2.93 long-term support. That's basically where I've landed. So now let's hit Insert here, which gets rid of that extra keyframe. I'm not going to worry about, okay, like he doesn't really have any outlines on his crown. Maybe I'll get to that. I probably should. I definitely see a change there. Obviously, the outlines. There's a lot of things that are changing in this character. So it looks to me like the thing to do here would be to bake it together. So I'm going to bake this. So this is the crown, or the tip of the crown, or the whatever you want to call it. The diadem. I don't know. And this is Vespigi. The fixes. So I'm going to hit Control E, double check my hotkeys and make sure they haven't changed. Yeah, I'm going to merge with the layer below. So now I've just merged those together so that now, if I hit the tilde key, this is what I've got. So now that definitely looks better. So now the question becomes, well, what about the dimensionality of my character? Because she's a little thin. Now, to be fair, friends, I'm asking for trouble. Let me think about this for half a second. Why am I asking for trouble? Because there are quite a few shots in the show that use this same pose. So I am definitely going to have to reinsert it into a bunch of other poses or a bunch of other shots if I go all the way here. But you know what? I've kind of made my decision as far as this crown goes, because I think, let's go back over to this other screen. I'm pretty sure hey, Tiny Salad, and Chris K. Well, you know what? You guys, I mean, you guys are all the old timers. Of course, I've only been gone for 2 months, but you know, thanks everybody for showing up. It's pretty cool. So yeah, if we go back here, what we have is, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to actually stick some markers in here. There's a marker there. Marker there. Golly, yeah. See, there's a bunch of shots that use the same shot of Vespigi. Oh, this is not good. But it is what it is. So here's the one that, golly, it almost seems like it. You know, the problem is, if it was just the fact that he's a little too thin, I probably would try to find some better solution. The problem is the stupid crown. It's like, what were you thinking that day, Dave? How stupid can you be? Okay, so this is the shot I'm actually working on right now. It's like it's the caper, the case of the cockeyed crown. We've been afflicted by the case of the cockeyed crown, which means there's like a bunch of shots we're gonna have to re-render and stuff. So I guess the world will keep on turning. So, all right, so now here we go. So here's what's gonna happen, friends, is this drawing right here in shot number 184, this is going to wind up getting cut and pasted. Like this picture of Vespigi is going to wind up getting pasted into some other shots. So that actually informs a couple other steps. If we know we're going to be reusing this thing like a lot, why don't we just hold our horses here and get down and dirty and really make this thing, really clean it up. I mean, look at this crap.
This is not good. This is not good.
So, okay, guys. What else is going on? Somebody talk to me. What are you guys working on? I want to know what you guys are working on. Are you guys creating any, stuff that's, that you think's cool, that you're looking forward to getting out there or doing something with or whatever? I mean, I have no idea. What is going on in your lives? Okay, so everybody in the chat, tell Dave what you've been up to in your animation life. Being lazy and playing games. Nothing wrong with that, man. Nothing wrong with that. Especially going into the holiday season. Why not enjoy some gaming? No big deal. Well, my beautiful partner Valerie, being that she has a chronic pain condition that's pretty disruptive to life. She's an avid gamer. She does quite a bit of gaming to keep her mind occupied, for sure. So, I got brave thanks to you. Oh, Blender grease pencil, yeah. Yeah, the Blender grease pencil's still out there. As I say, I've been sort of tracking the Blender 3.0 development, and the grease pencil implementation in 2.93 is, pretty good. It's certainly the best version of grease pencil so far. So, I mean, if I was starting completely all over, especially with a different type of show, if I was doing a show that used a lot of 3/4 view, not so much anime style, I guess I'd call this show, but if it was more where you just got these, like the example I always give is Family Guy, where pretty much they all look the same all the time. It's just a 3/4 view kind of thing. If I was doing a show like that, I probably would be using grease pencil. Because number one, it's essentially a vector format, even though technically it's not. Meaning everything's scalable. And obviously the animation tools in terms of rigging and sort of leveraging your work. Leveraging today's work to reuse tomorrow. Blender is the best game in town when it comes to that. Compared to the other software I use, like here, obviously Krita or Opentoonz / Tahoma. The penis. Have you seen that new Blender grease pencil add-on that lets you scrub timeline anywhere on the viewport? No. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily myself find that useful, because I've with Blender, I've always been used to the hotkeys on the keyboard for jumping forward either 1 frame or 10 frames or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, that might be useful. Might be useful for sure. I've mentioned here before that for me, I mean, if I'm using Blender grease pencil and I'm, believe it or not, I still use Blender 2.79. There's a lot of shots in this show that were done in Blender 2.79. I just actually fixed one yesterday. Fixed it up a bit. But if you want the modern implementation of grease pencil, you've got to be in Blender 2.8 or later. And for me, I liked 2.81 for 2 reasons. One was that the masking, the layer masking, was very simple. It was just stack based. So it's just less setup required. It still only takes 1 minute to set up masking. in the Blender grease pencil. But 2.81 kind of just hit the sweet spot for me. But it's hard to justify not going forward from 2.81A, to be specific, because of the improvements in the fill tool. The improvements in the fill tool have been pretty substantial. You know, the automatic stroke extension works really well. I mean, as far as making sure that all gaps are closed in a way that doesn't actually change the art. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it'd be like this. I could show an example. So let me save my work. Okay, so it'd be like this. Let's say I've got a grease pencil thing in Blender that's like this, and it's not closed. Okay, there's an option that effectively takes these lines and extends them like this. So when you do the fill operation, it guarantees that it'll get filled in. But then after the fill operation is over, these lines don't stay in. They disappear. And so, I mean, it was really a smart way to do it, frankly, to deal with gap closing. Most software doesn't really do a great job with the whole gap closing thing. There's artifacts that it creates where it winds up being as useless as it is useful, you know, in practice. And whereas the way they did it with the gap closer, whatever they call it, I don't know what they call it, I don't have it in front of me, but whatever they did was an innovative approach to gap closing that for me was palpably better. I mean, it was a substantial improvement over the way it's usually done, which most software tends to use the same basic methodology for trying to close gaps. You can tell by the results that it gets because they tend to have the same kinds of artifacts and whatnot. Okay, so now we got a little roughness here on the edge with the crown. That's, I mean, he's on the screen for one frame, so I think we'll probably let that one go. Okay, not horrible, saving my work. Okay, yeah, so nothing new. The other thing about Blender 2.81 that I liked was 8.1a was the last version of Blender where they had it all set up by default the way it had been for 20 years, where you select things with the right mouse button, and also you could click anywhere in the video editing timeline and in order to jump to that spot, whereas in every later version of Blender you have to grab the little widget. It'd be like the difference between, like right now, if I'm clicking anywhere here, it's not jumping to that frame, right? I have to grab this little widget and drag it around to actually be on that frame. Now, to me, it's not a big crime or anything, but it's not as convenient. Earlier versions of Blender, you just click somewhere and you're there, right? So that's nitpicking. I know it's just opinion. So anyway, okay, so we've got this. Additionally, we've got this little bit of a ridiculous shadow kicking in. Okay, so the question becomes, can we fix the weight problem with a transform mask? It's certainly worth a try since it's non-destructive. What I'm about to do is probably going to blow up Krita, so I'm saving my work. And why do I say that? Because I'm using a transform mask and I'm going to try liquefy. I don't think it's going to work. The only reason I'm using liquefy is because I want to widen his head without affecting his body. And I'm pretty sure this is not going to work. But it might work. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to hit enter. And if this worked, I will be impressed. Okay, now I assume it's thinking. Thinking. Huh. And now it's thinking some more. Okay, so that's interesting. If I turn this off, so as you can see, when you turn the transform, okay, so I'll give Krita credit. Hey, Ashton. I will give Krita credit because That's a lot of calculation. I mean, it's looking at everything I did with the liquify tool, and then it has to apply it to every frame that's animated. So when I turn it off, you see, when I turn it back on, it takes it a minute to calculate. Perfectly understandable. It'd be cool if they could sort of cache the result so it doesn't have to constantly recalculate it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump forward to this frame right here to see how his body weight looks compared to the later frames that look okay. Now, if I wanted to make this easier on myself, this is what I would do. This is something you guys probably want to, this is where you want to take note. If you've done something with the transform mask, for example, especially like this where it's clearly taking it like that, you know, it takes it some time to calculate. How do you, and what I need to do is compare how he looks here to how he looks here. See, every time I go back, it's got to recalculate. That's not something to complain about. But what I would say is this. If you're in that situation, the best thing to do is take this layer that has the transform mask attached to it, click this icon to make a duplicate of it, and then merge it together. So you'd make a duplicate, but then turn that duplicate off. And then this one, I would say flatten the layer. When you flatten the layer, it's going to calculate that transform mask into every frame, and once it's done calculating, it won't have to think about it anymore. Now, it looks like it might be done, and it is. So now, if it turned out I made a mistake and I need to go in and make some changes to that transform mask, I could always go back to this layer that's got the transform mask still live. Now, it looks to me like I did okay. So I'm going to kill that and save my work. Hope that makes sense. I find software like Blender and Clip Studio Paint to be really good, but they both need a bit of setup to work best. You know, the shortcuts and so on. Yeah, that's for sure true with Blender. I mean, I do the same thing with Krita and Opentoonz, and it's actually one of the things I used to complain about with Krita a lot, is when you, like for example, if I hit the B key and then right mouse click, I get my favorites here, right? And you can decide which brush collection you want to have show up in the wheel, but the point is, anytime Krita would get upgraded or whatever, all my preferences would be destroyed. I mean, I would have to completely start from scratch every time. Now, that's another thing. The reason I mention that is one of the things they finally did with Krita 5 is you can make all of the local Krita data actually local to the application folders, meaning that Krita is actually portable. There's been portable Krita for a long time, but it hasn't ever been truly portable because it stores the configuration data for your personal setup, your hotkeys, things like that. It stores it in the system folders. You now have the option to store it wherever the heck you want. And how you do that, actually, let me see here. I'm going to take a quick look, and if it doesn't jump out and bite me, I'm not going to keep looking for it. But resources, yep, there you go. I think this is it. Yeah. See, I've got this folder called Dave that's in the Krita 5 beta folder. This used to not be there. You didn't have this ability to locate your resources wherever you wanted to put them. And ever since they've had that, which showed up in the first, it might have even been in the alpha version of Krita 5, but ever since they've had that option, the portability problem in Krita has been solved for me. Meaning, if I replace the version of Krita, all of my hotkeys and configuration, brush collections have been preserved, which is wonderful. That was never true until Krita 5. So, okay, so the other thing I'm looking at here is I'm going to go ahead and take this shot of Vespigi and put it in a group so I can add another layer on top of it. And I'm going to alpha lock the layer, hit the G key and just go to black here. And I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of a shape here like that. Because I'm seeing, and then I'm going to hit Control Insert to add a keyframe, and then I'm going to go here and hit insert so that that keyframe, so that there, you know, that it's blank from here on, and that way I can go ahead and, yeah, you kind of have this shadowiness here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that now. I knew I needed to look at the other layer before I got too crazy with the shadow, but yeah, and I really just did too much. Okay, and then let's just add that little bit of, yeah, that's better. That'll work. And now shadows don't really move with the character, so yeah, that worked. Okay, so now I can take this, and all I'm going to do is, I could merge this down, but what I'll do is I'll just go merge group. So that'll take that group and flatten it out. Okay. The only other thing I'm seeing right now is, I'm going to hit the B key. I want to just punch up his eyes a little bit. Can't say I feel that I did the best drawing I've ever done here, but okay. Save our work. And what we're going to do now is let's render it. So Control R is the, and by the way, it's another thing with Krita 5, if you don't know, Krita 5 now saves your render settings just like Tahoma or Opentoonz does. It saves the render settings with the Krita file, which means, this is actually a really huge benefit to Krita 5, is you can open up a shot that you did a month ago, make a couple changes or whatever, and just hit Control R and re-render, and it will re-render to the same place, same file name, same everything as it was originally. Now, because this Krita file has not been saved with render settings baked in yet, these settings are from a different shot that I did yesterday. Once I change them and save the Krita file, they'll be permanently in this Krita file. So I'm going to go back here. I just want to do a little due diligence here. This is shot number. Don't just create a Krita open cell animation format as open format to ease the exchange of traditional frame by frame cell animation between different applications. At the risk of missing something obvious, the medium of exchange between animation programs for frame by frame animation, of course, is just an image sequence. So I assume the OCA format also preserves some information about the timing, like how long frames are held and things like that. That must be what it is. Blending modes. Well, okay, that's cool. Yeah, Soda Pop for sure. That sounds like a, you know, I mean, it depends on what other program you're going to bring it into that also obviously has to understand the OCA format, but, yep. Yeah, so far what I've done is I just stick with image sequences, and I can justify that to a degree because, like, I've had shots that I've done in Krita. And by the way, while I'm talking, I'm looking my properties up here to make sure I get the image location and format correct. So it's 184-E, and then there's no underscore or dot or anything. Okay, so I have had shots that I've done in Krita, and then for various reasons, I've needed to completely reproduce everything in Tahoma. And what I found was to literally cut and paste all the individual keyframes, background images, and then reproduce the timing, the whole deal, normally only takes about 5 minutes, actually, to completely reproduce it. Now if this was, we're dealing with one shot at a time, so to be fair, Soda Pop, if I had a timeline that was like a minute long or something, then I definitely would love to have something like the OCA format to get me from one program to the other. But on the other hand, that never happens for me for the simple reason that if I did have an animated timeline in Krita that was a minute long, the performance of Krita would be so bad that I would never be doing it in Krita in the first place like that, right? So as a guy that pretty much relegates, your program file to a single shot, almost all the time, not all the time, but usually, an interchange format has never really emerged as something that would be probably that useful for me. Let's see, I want 184. But it would be nice, if you could... Okay, that's the folder. I can't do two things at once, you guys know that. 184-E. So this is 184-E. Okay, so it's a ping. Yes. So what should happen now is Krita should warn me. And it did. So that means I'm saving in the right place. And by the way, that's another thing with Krita 5. The rendering is, man, is it fast. Really, really good improvement on the rendering speed. Okay, so let's go back over to Vegas. And now this image sequence should have updated. Yep, look at that. Cool. Now I was thinking about, let me look at this timing on this. I was thinking about adding an extra tween, but I mean, it's only playing at 8 frames per second, but boy, that seems pretty smooth to me. Yeah, there we go. So 184 is going to be my guide, right? Because here's slightly fatter Vespigi, and here's slightly skinnier Vespigi. So now, to be fair, if it wasn't for the stupid crown being off center, I could probably just like make the whole frame a little bit wider, and you'd never know. But here's the thing. Here's what's going to happen, I think, in practice. What's going to happen is I'm going to wind up taking this one shot of Vespigi. Boom, that one right there. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to come back here. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to plan ahead here. So this shot could be useful. And I don't know why I have an extra keyframe in here. So let me just look at that for a half a second. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and merge Vespigi. There's no reason to keep these two tracks separate now. Okay, so we've got the earlier shots and then we got the later shot. So we might as well merge them. And that's Control E. And now we have one single track of Vespigi. Okay, so there he goes. All right, so that's what we just did. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control A, Control C, and I'm going to open up Tahoma, and I'm going to go ahead and paste Vespigi into Tahoma, because I'm going to want to save this so I can use it later in some other shots. So coming back over here, I'm going to have to reproduce. I'm going to have to reproduce a little bit of this attitude, the way he's shifting his weight around. I'm not sure I'm totally buying that, but it's not horrible. Nah, it's okay. But I think I could reproduce this in Tahoma like really, really fast. So I'm going to give that a try. All right. Since we're just doing this in real time today, let's just rock and roll and do it. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so there's Vespigi. And what we're going to want to do here is probably not hit the A key. I probably want to hit the S key and just go ahead and get him kind of down to the edge of the screen. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here. So Soda Pop, so Blender can already read OCA. I wonder how it imports it. So if you're bringing something out of Krita, how would it deal with the blending modes and stuff? I assume it would just bring it in as an image sequence, maybe mapped to a plane. It's not going to convert it to grease pencil. I mean, I'm really sure of that. So, so yeah, do you know that? Do you know how does Blender, if I send an OCA file from Krita, how would that come into Blender? What would it be? That would be interesting to know. Okay, so we're in Vegas here. This is shot number 187. Now, in order to not be... Well, yeah, but in other words, what I'm asking is, what does Blender do with it? Like, okay, so Blender's reading this OCA file. Obviously, you're referencing an image sequence, and then you're referencing keyframe data. Okay, so the question then becomes, well, what does Blender actually do with it? Does it take the image sequence and map it to a plane? Is that what you're saying is correct? Or are you just saying correct that they can bring it in? If it does bring it in as an image sequence mapped to a plane, that would be the most sensible approach, I should think. You know, I mean, unless it brought it into the sequence editor, the video sequence editor, which I guess that isn't a ridiculous idea. Brings it into the sequence editor as an image sequence, but it actually breaks the individual images up into varying durations. That would be okay. That would work. Okay. So now what I'm looking at right now is, before I go too far, I need to make sure that this shot 187 isn't already a Tahoma/Opentoonz shot. So what I'm going to do is hit the browser, and I want to go to Salt and Light Scenes. Boom. And now he's going to have to think about it for a bit. Man, I've been live streaming for over an hour, so yeah, this is the Animation Truman Show. Okay, so we're looking to see if there is, in fact, a shot number 187.tnz. There's 195, 93, 184. Nope, there isn't. Okay, so that's good. I didn't think there would be. So now what I'm going to do is go File, Save All, and we're going to save this as shot number, and we're not going to save it in Val's Anime. We're going to save it in Salt and Light. Whoops. Oh, let me redo that. Okay, Control S. Okay, I wasn't sure if Tahoma, you know, under the hood switched projects, which it looks like it did. So 187. So this is going to be 187. And that is not 187A or anything like that. So it's just 187. Okay, now that's interesting. So now this is something I've literally never bumped into before. The best way to solve this, or at least the quickest way, I would say, is to just load. I'm going to discard the changes and load this scene, because it looks to me, this is kind of an interesting thing. Okay, yeah. So it looks like I did do some work with Vespigi back in the day in Tahoma. But in order to stay on track, I am going to go ahead and just kind of start from scratch here. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Hello, grab this, Control C, go to Tahoma, click on a blank cell, Control V, and it's kind of taking a minute. Okay. I see what's going on here. Yeah, the default frame size for Salt and Light is 1280 by 720. So hence the drawing appears to have been pasted in bigger. Okay, so I'm just going back over here and looking at the chat here real quick. Amar, thanks for weighing in. You can already import an image sequence into Blender as a reference sequence and as a grease pencil object unless you guys are discussing something different. Right. Well, yeah. And to tell you the truth, I don't love the way there are some aspects of how Blender deals with image sequences that, as far as I can tell, have been steps backward. So the way that you deal with, like the add-on that lets you import images as a sequence mapped to a plane, worked really well and really flexibly in Blender 2.79, and then it kind of took some steps backward. But I won't elaborate on that. Tahoma versus Krita versus Blender for animation. Is that a question, Adyan Goswami? Adyan Goswami. Sounds like a Indian name or something. Amar's answers are quite correct. They're just tools, and you have to use whatever works for your workflow. So the best answer I could give you, though, would be this. If you're going into CGI at all, then it's got to be Blender. So that settles that. But when you say Blender, if you're referring specifically to 2D animation with the Blender grease pencil, okay, then I'd say if you're going to go the Blender direction, that's going to give you tremendous flexibility. In other words, there's nothing that you could possibly want to do in the animation space that you couldn't do with Blender. Guarantee you. Okay? But you're going to have a hell of a learning curve. So enjoy the learning curve, but you'll never go wrong. Krita is superior for painting. Krita is the worst for animation. It's better in Krita 5 than previous versions. Before Krita 5, it was literally only frame-by-frame animation, which not that long ago was true of Clip Studio Paint. Okay? The middle ground that gives you the ability to do just about anything you'd want to do with a fairly modest learning curve is the software I'm using right here, right now, which is Tahoma, or you could call it Opentoonz, either way. The only difference for me between Tahoma and Opentoonz is that Tahoma lets you cut and paste from Krita. So if you want the benefits of painting in Krita and all the benefits of animation without the big Blender learning curve, then do it the way I'm doing it, which is you do your painting in Krita, you cut and paste things occasionally into Tahoma, although Tahoma's own drawing and painting tools are quite good. And my main tool would be Tahoma. That's my main tool. Now, if you want to talk about compositing, it's a toss-up. Actually, I would say, unless you're getting into things like motion tracking and stuff like that, generally speaking, I would say, when you say for compositing, I take that to mean for node-based post-production. Okay, so you want a node-based interface that lets you add color correction and things like that. And the answer is that the node-based compositing in Tahoma or Opentoonz is very, very, very good. Blender is arguably better, and in some ways arguably worse. Performance-wise, it's probably a toss-up. So, at least 2 French studios use Blender for their shows and films. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The thing I would encourage everybody here, because it always turns into these questions, obviously, about what software is best. And the reality is, you could be scanning stuff in off paper. I mean, honestly, it's so easy to spend so much time just poking around and kicking the tires of different software tools instead of really diving in and learning them inside and out. And the guy that only has one tool, even if it's a less capable tool like Krita for animation, look at what Ed Tadeo does with Krita. It looks great, right? So it's really not about the tool. So I think, I could be wrong here, guys, but I think that when somebody says which software is better, what they're really asking me is, what can I learn as fast as possible, as well as possible, so that I can realize my vision, whatever that vision is, so that I want to create cool stuff. What's the best way to get there? And I would say, generally speaking, for most people, probably Tahoma would be the best of the three, because it's a good balance of modest learning curve but very, very capable animation tools. Natron, I have to say, AMAR, the problem with Natron is that the documentation is essentially non-existent. And I've installed, for over 10 years, I've installed many, many, many versions of DaVinci. Never had one version that ran without immediate glitches. HitFilm is quite good on the post-production side. Obviously, After Effects is very capable on the post-production side. If you want to become a full-time animator and you're thinking in terms of job, Blender editing is good. It's not amazing, but yeah, there's pretty good video editing built into Blender. I mean, the opening to the anime I was working on before I started working on Salt and Light. Let me see if I can pull it up here. But this is yeah, right there you go. So this was all edited in Blender. I actually did the video editing in Blender. Right? So, and this is, you know, this is like 8 minutes of animation, right? So this is all video edited in Blender, and you can, you know, you can add color correction nodes and things like that. Now, the integration of the video editing with the node-based compositing really is not as smart and seamless as one might hope. But basically, and I guess to kind of put the discussion to bed, let me say this. Adyan Goswami, if your goal is to make yourself marketable, in other words, you say, I've got to learn the skills of animation, I got to learn the tools, what do I do? Okay? If you want to be marketable, if you want to give yourself opportunities to not only create anything you could want to create, but also find a job in the real world, learn Blender. Forget Opentoonz, forget Krita, because those are open source programs that, by and large, with very few exceptions, are not actually used that much in the real world. So in terms of job marketability, it doesn't do much for you, right? Okay, so for your own projects or whatever, and a modest learning curve, I do recommend Opentoonz or Tahoma. But if you want to be marketable and you want to learn, if you want to embark on a 2-year program where you're going to really dedicate yourself to learning one tool inside and out that opens as many doors as possible for you, there is no debate here. And Amar, you can disagree if you want, but I think you're going to agree with me that there is no debate. If you want the best solution to that problem that I just described, Blender is where you want to be. Because Blender has widespread traction in the real world. There's a lot of studios using Blender for a lot of things nowadays. So there you go. Tahoma2D is actually great because if you learn it inside and out, you'll have zero problems learning the commercial ones for studio work. That is pretty much true. The learning curve on Opentoonz or Tahoma2D is sufficiently challenging that it does acclimate you to what it takes to learn a complex piece of software. But you can be up and running and productive and doing stuff in Opentoonz in an hour. I don't think you're going to do that with Blender very often. Yeah, well, obviously Adobe too, right? Obviously. Okay, so getting back to work here. 187. Okay, so what I was going to do then is just immediately save this as 187. Okay. So clicky, Control S. And now we're in the right location. It remembers that I wanted to use 187 as my file name. Groovy. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, do I want to do a transform here or just like shrink this? I think I'll just shrink it. Okay, so I'm going to hit the S key, Control A. I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. Okay, and there really is apparently no real way around this. I'm going to have to I have to translate it, but I'm going to be using the... So what I really need to do is add the plastic tool and then translate the plastic tool. So how do you do that? All right. Save all. Especially with the adoption of the current market, Blender would be a better place to start. Yeah. It's a long path, but it's not that long. I mean, for God's sake, if you really worked hard... Okay, so like back in the year 1999 to 2000 was the first time I learned Blender because, as some of you guys know, I was quite literally the first guy on the planet to ever create a Blender training video. And sold quite a few of them actually around 2001 or whatever it was, and then I helped to co-author the Blender tutorial guide volume 2, and co-authored that with Karsten Vortman and Ton Rosendahl obviously sort of oversaw the project. Bart Val, I don't know how to say his last name, Valhausen. He runs, last I knew, Blender Nation, the website Blender Nation. Bart started that. Anyway, but way back then, the documentation was really poor. So Blender was a lot simpler program, but it was also way poorly documented. So it was kind of the same situation you have today, where you got a more complex program, but way better documentation. And it took me about a month. I basically had to fight with Blender for about a month and search through the forums to get questions answered, blah, 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 blah. Once I got through that month, being able to adapt to new versions of Blender has never really been that tough. You might have a day or two of kind of dinking around with it, but it's not that big of a deal. So, and Amar's point about having a niche rather than being a generalist is a great point. All of the above, all of the niches one might want to pursue in the animation space are accommodated by Blender. If you're a 2D guy, you're a grease pencil person. If you're a compositor, you're a node person. If you're a modeler, well, you're a modeler, and or you might be a geometry nodes person, right? So all of the specialties associated with animation are accommodated by Blender. So as far as the Swiss Army knife, that's the program. So I hit the X key and I'm going to create a mesh, and that's that. And now what I was kind of saying before was that I'm hitting the A key, and I'm not going to shrink the character, I'm going to shrink the plastic tool. Because if I shrink the character, then the plastic tool actually won't work properly on it. Okay, so I just wanted to get that into position. Then I'm going to hit the X key again. I'm going to build a skeleton. I'm going to add a couple nodes here, and then basically what I'm doing right now is I'm putting like the dummy nodes around the perimeter so that when I move bones, it's not going to move parts of the character that I don't want to move. All I want to do is give a little indication of where his neck would be, and then his head. And then that's pretty much it. Usually with the plastic tool. Yeah, see, this allows me to kind of... it's not quite satisfactory, frankly, but not a bad start. Okay, so let's give that a little bit more wiggle room. And then I'm thinking I'm actually going to put a little bit of influence from here over to his shoulders. And maybe let's just get rid of that node. Okay, so the idea being that if he sort of bends at the neck, you would expect the shoulders to move naturally to a degree. That's not horrible. You don't have a lot of room. I mean, you can't do a lot of it. But if you move it only a little bit like that, that works. Right? So, Huh? What are you saying? Well, I don't know if I agree with that. So, I just don't know about that around here. Okay, you get the idea. So that's what you can do very, very quickly and easily with the plastic tool in Opentoonz or Tahoma. So now what I've done is I've saved shot number 187. And so basically, this one's already been rendered, and I just stole this drawing that I modified the shape of his head a little bit and brought it into Tahoma. So basically, this this scene right here will serve as the starting point to go ahead and fix all these ones that I put markers on, where Vespiki is, you know, his body just isn't quite the right shape, you know. Okay, so you can storyboard and write your screenplay in Blender with the help of some plugins. Yep. Well, yeah, and that's the other thing about Blender. I mean, it's Python everywhere. I mean, even if you're not even an animator, but you're just like into Python, becoming, you know, Blender as your, you know, your sort of tool of choice, not for programming per se, but for what you're going to develop. You know, you got a huge marketplace for Blender add-ons, you know. I want something Power Pack which has animation tool compositing. I don't want to use multiple softwares. Open. Yeah, so that's it. Soda Pop, dude, come on now. We're spending all this time trying to help Adyan, and we all agree that if the guy's going to pick one tool that's going to get him where he wants to be, probably Blender's the tool. And then you come in and saying, well, it's overkill for 2D. No, it's not. That's not really fair. Look. Let's go here. Okay? Let's go here. This is Blender. Okay, Adyan? This is Blender. And I don't know. I'm going to see if this is... Okay, so this is grease pencil animation. And it is what it is. I don't know that I did a wonderful job in this particular scene, but... no, I mean, you can draw, you can ink, you can color in, you can do flood fills, and you can do deformation. So, it's all there. Why are you sorry, dude? It's all good, man. We're trying to help you here. It's all good. Soda Pop. I know. And you're welcome to your opinion. It's not that there's anything wrong with your opinion. Blender is overkill for a lot of things. Okay? It is overkill. I don't use it for 2D animation that much. There are plenty of shots in this show that were done with Blender. But lots of experience has caused me to land on not preferring Blender for 2D animation. But for somebody that's looking for the one tool that will give them job marketability and the ability creatively to do whatever they want to do, that's what I would say for a guy like Adyan is Blender's probably where he wants to be. So beyond that, you guys can duke it out and disagree if you want, and it's all good. Yeah, you can use Sketchbook Pro or Pencil 2D for 2D animation. Yeah, it's actually true. In fact, one thing I noticed the other day is that actually, if you don't mind using page up and page down to do flipping, the truth of the matter is that my Paint 2 isn't too bad for doing like pencil test animation and stuff like that. You can actually do pretty decent pencil test animation with my Paint, and because it's got an infinite canvas and a real clean interface, you just can kind of sit down and start working, you know, which is pretty cool. So anyway, back to work here, friends. So what do we have? I'm kind of working backwards. I'm probably going to wrap it up here pretty soon. Being that I haven't live streamed in a while, Yep. No, it's all good. I mean, Soda Pop's opinion is well taken. I mean, he's got a point. He definitely has a point. If I thought Blender was the perfect tool, I'd be using it all the time. You know. Ain't that the truth, Amar? Ain't that the truth? Okay, so shot 187. What really happens here? He kind of scowls. Does a little shift of his weight. So what is going to be the deal breaker is the scowl. But maybe I can pull this off with the plastic tool. This is going to be risky behavior. I'm getting into dangerous behavior here today, guys. Here's what I'm going to do. Watch this. I'm going to actually pull this down. This is dangerous behavior. But I'm going to try. Never hurts to try. Okay, I'm going to add these nodes over here. Slide that up there. And probably put in some protective nodes here. So you guys might be going, what the heck is he doing? I get it. I get it. It's all good. Extra node there. Extra node there. Okay, so now we're going to see if this is even a viable concept. So the concept here, I'm going to save this because this could become quite useful. What I'm trying to do is add enough nodes that I can actually make this guy scowl, which again, kind of risky behavior. What I'm going to do is hit Alt-A and bring these nodes, or I should say bring these cells down, open up some new cells so that I'm putting the animation keys on a different frame. Okay. Yep, there we go. I actually succeeded. I can't freaking believe it worked, but it did. So now look at that. I'm just going to go, and watch this one. Okay, now that did not work. Okay, so let me hit undo. What I'm going to do is change keep distance so that I'm only moving this little node here. And look at that. See the problem? Okay, so let me fix that. The way we fix that is we're going to add a couple extra nodes here to protect this area over here, so that this bone isn't affecting stuff we don't want it to affect. Now, the Blender fans out there would go, yeah, you can do that with Blender, you like vertex groups and everything else. The thing is, this is so fast to set up and so easy to tweak that I think for a lot of people, this is really a easier way to work. Okay, so now you see what's happening is it's affecting, okay, and I'm going to make one more change. I'm going to take this node right here and put it on his skin. And, you know, not too much fiddling around. But all I did was just add a little scowl. Okay. Now, I'm going to, this option here, keep distance, I'm going to turn that back on. And that keeps the bones from stretching. It makes them, well, it does just what it sounds like. It keeps the distances the same. Whereas the way I was doing it a moment ago actually causes the bones to, I guess you'd say the bones to stretch. Okay, once we do more, most of us talk ourselves out of things because we make excuses why we can't or do certain things. You don't usually need a month to figure out a software. Not usually. I mean, like I said, you could definitely give a month to Blender and still have more to learn, but and around talk face reality and doing and finishing our projects. Yeah, about to start another year. Is how many of us have finished any real projects relative to our own project? Well, yeah, that is true. Look at that. That actually worked. That actually worked. Look at that. Who'd have thunk it? I'm kind of impressed that that worked out. Okay, so going back to Vegas, again, I'm just kind of looking at this as a model of what I think he sort of did. And so that scowl, and he's kind of shifting his weight, and then he cocks his head. All right, so let's just see what we can do with that. This is an interesting challenge. I just want to match what I did in Krita with drawings. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is actually take these two nodes, these animation keys, and just move them down so that we get into the scene for half a second before, and by the way, literally half a second, before he scowls. Huh? So he scowls, and then what would he do? I don't want to move that. I don't want to move that. I want to move this. Okay, so one thing I also want to do is hit Control C here and add another. So I'm duplicating this so that there's no interpolation between the two. Okay, one other change I guess I would want to make here is probably open that up a little bit. Obviously we can't see what goes on below the screen, so I like that. Yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what we saw in Krita. Okay, and then let's go here, Control C, again, duplicate that, and then he's going to completely like shift his weight the other way and then cock his head. Like, huh? Can we do that? Is there a way? Which in the script is actually what he's saying, more or less. So yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Let's go up here to the top. Yep, not bad. I'm not totally happy with the timing. I mean, I think some of these things are happening too slowly and stuff, but the basic concept is not too shabby. At least something to show for our enlightened opinions. I say that to you, Dave. If I had to pay someone to complete my project... If I pay someone to complete my project next year, I'll have at least one project completed. Yeah, I mean, I'm in kind of an interesting place in that, you know, Salt and Light, I really just need to do the score. See, this is what I was going to do, is I was going to, I don't know, were you around when I kind of ran through the music stuff I was working on, Amar? I don't know if they'd still use Windows XP. I can tell you, Soda Pop, that I wrote, directed, and edited 5 movies on XP, and when I went to Windows 8.1, which is what I'm using here on this machine actually, it really was kind of a lot better performance and stuff. Yeah, okay, well, it's just basically this. I'll just kind of let this play.
You know, Asher, there's something I've been wondering about.
I knew this day would come. Well, it's perfectly natural to want to know your story.
Story?
To finally learn how you came to live with me.
Actually, I was just wondering if we had any honey cakes. But now that you mention it, I have always kind of wondered.
All right, Melchizedek.
So you get the idea. So this is what I've really been doing this week, is just doing the score, and I just got to do the music. And once I get this whole sequence done, which it's, let me see, there's a fair amount yet to do, but most of the musical ideas have been figured out, let's put it that way. So at this point, what I had thought about doing is, I mean, this is really the opening of the show. I was thinking about actually just releasing this, just release it on YouTube as the first basically 5-minute webisode kind of thing. You know, and maybe that would help get the show a little bit of, you know, traction or mind share, whatever you want to say. I'm glad you like the Foley effects. You know, I mean, it's pretty much my job. You know, I'm kind of responsible to make sure I do the audio as well as it can be. And so as I mentioned earlier, which probably, I don't know if most people here now were there then, but, you know, an hour ago or whatever it was. But, you know, some of the voices need to be redone. You know, my daughter Natalie actually turned out to be surprisingly good playing the part of Tianara, so she's going to be basically, you know, she basically got the part, you know. And then Maria, I still have Maria's actual voice recording on file as a possibility for the slave girl whose name escapes me. I forget her name. But yeah, so we got to get the voices blocked in, and then everything you just saw there is just a microcosm of what has to be done for. Well, the thing is, Amar, here's the thing. If I release this sequence is going to be 5 minutes long, but it begins with this. It begins with the intro to the show, right? So we've got the whole show intro, which is is that a minute or 30 seconds? I think it's a minute. Yeah, it's a minute because it's got all the narration with Asher. Let me look here. Blah, 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 blah. Where is the big clock? Alt-C. Come on, clock. Where are you? Oh, there you are.
The big clock is over here.
But anyway, so you've got the whole show intro, and then you've got an opening scene that's about 5 minutes long, if I remember right. I don't know what the length of it is, but it's a good little sequence. And then that basically gives you the backstory behind the whole epic. So let me look at what you're suggesting here. A teaser that you can share that's 30 to 20 seconds. Yeah, and technically you would think that the intro to the show would already be up as a YouTube short. I'm not sure. I think by default they do that for you. And then release the file. But yeah, you're right. I get what you're saying. It's kind of the marketing funnel of a YouTube channel is you really probably want to have some sort of judicious mix of shorts with mid-length content, like 5 to 8 minutes, and then long-form content and the occasional live stream. It all works together. So if you do that and it gets a pop, then you'll have to have more to show. Yeah, and again, this is something I thought about in terms of sort of balancing it with the idea of crowdfunding. If a 5-minute episode, or call it a webisode or whatever you want to call it, got a lot of views and kind of caught some traction for people to want to know more about the show, then it might be actually more appropriate at that point to launch the idea of a crowdfund. The whole rationale of a crowdfund is real simple. I've been given this thing at max, on average, certainly 1 to 2 hours a day. And so it's like, well, if I could justify making it a full-time job, then, it kind of seems to me that getting an episode done in 4 months or whatever would not be that ridiculous at all. So I don't know how compelling of a story that really is. I think it would depend a lot on whether people see a little bit of it and like it. Do they enjoy it? So, but anyway, I think with that, I'm probably going to wrap up for today. Let's see, I've been live streaming for almost 2 hours, and I think I might be ready for a break. So, are there any other thoughts or questions that you guys have before I bail on you? Things seem to be pretty quiet. Okay. So anyway, thanks for hanging out today, guys. It's been fun. It's been nice to get back on with the Animation Truman Show. The thing I will be thinking about, thanks, Soda Pop. I appreciate that. And thanks for your input, Amar. Thank you, Maria. That's very sweet. So the question for me on live streaming pretty much is this. Am I making substantially less progress when I'm live streaming than if I'm not live streaming? That's the important question. So today we did okay, actually. Diving in on this Krita thing and fixing Vespegia has been pretty good. So no complaints so far. But yeah, the most important thing to me, guys, going forward in my life right now is just to really anchor in on these 3 core skills of writing, animating, and obviously scoring and post-producing cartoons. And, we'll continue to figure out what that looks like in terms of my aspirations going forward. But it really is what I want to do. It's what I want to basically have be my quiet little life. My quiet little life. I just do these 3 things. That's what I'm trying to do. And same to you, Amar. Have a great holiday. I'll probably be live streaming before then, but I guess with that, I will say see you later. And as I have always said, and as you guys know, there will be more later.